Janet, I'm going to go to like 11:45 just to let you know, since I got redefined apologetics on, and then because we're coming to a time crunch, redefine. I do apologize. Okay, so how you doing?
Not too bad. First question is, are you hearing me okay?
Yes, I'm hearing you fine.
Okay. So I drive truck. I'm in my truck right now. I couldn't click on the link in the cell phone, so I pulled my laptop out,
Okay,
and
I
I'm
hope
using
you're
that
not
right
driving the
now.
truck while doing this. I'm sorry, I had
No,
to. I had to. I know you're stopped, or if you have two drivers, that someone else is driving, but I had to.
yeah, and I know you said previously you're going to 11:30. It's already past 11:30. So and you have Janet coming up. I was going to want to talk about predestination because I have a different view than
Oh
what
yes.
most people have. Um, um, so, in 10 minutes or less than 10 minutes, let me just try to explain to you my view. First of all, I think that everyone is getting it wrong because of two words. I think, well, two phrases, whatever. Foreknew, for those whom he foreknew. I'm talking about the predestination spoken of in Romans chapter 8. So it talks about whom he foreknew. And I think you understand the way Leighton Flowers sees that, for whom he foreknew. I
Yes.
think that because we can say that God knows everything, we can say that. Because we can say that, people look at that foreknew in a way that Paul is not using it. I believe Paul is using that foreknew the same way Leighton is saying that he uses it. That is to say, the same way it's used in Acts chapter 26 and the same way it's used in Romans
11.
chapter 11,
Yeah,
which
that
appears to be
I
talking
agree
about
with.
people of the past.
I agree
So
with
I
that
think that's
view. I
okay.
want to let
I
you know
think,
when it comes to the foreknew, I agree with it because Romans 11 is clear on defining how foreknew is actually used.
right. So I think people, well, not everyone, but most people are getting it wrong because of that whom he foreknew. I think the
Right.
second thing that people are getting wrong is where I differ from Layden, where we would part ways, even though I haven't spoken to him, is what it means to be conformed to the image of his son.
Okay.
Um, so if you watch the video, you maybe remember I'm saying that Paul is talking about people in the Old Testament,
Right.
people that can be called types of Christ. And my what I'm saying is what it means to be conformed to the image of his son means to be a type of Christ. That is to say, Christ can be seen in those people, in types of Christ. And I say this that, like, for example, Jonah was conformed to the image of his son. That is to say, parts of the life of Christ can be seen in these people of whom I speak, of whom Paul spoke. So I say that Paul makes a statement in 28, and we know that all good for them that love God, to them who are the called according to the purpose. And the proof that we know is he refers back in 29 and 30 to people that for whom things work together for their good.
Right.
One example, Jonah might not be the best example, but let's use Joseph. Things work together for good. Why? He loved God. He was called according to his purpose. And Joseph is someone who we could say is a Christ. So we'll go back to Jonah, um, if I may
Actually,
jump back
no.
and forth.
Actually, Joseph is a great example because he's basically said the same thing as Romans 8:28 said when he talked about to his brothers. You thought it was for evil, but God made it for good. So yeah, Joseph is an excellent example of uh, of the idea of Romans 8:28.
Yeah, so lots of people, I've heard a handful of people, three, four people, when they talk about Romans 8:28, they will mention Joseph as an example. And I'm saying that that's the same thing Paul does, but he's not just looking at Joseph, he's looking at everybody who we could be called a type of Christ. Now, the reason I want to go jump back to Jonah is because of this. I'm saying that for, not just for Jonah, not just for Joseph, but for all the people that we could call types of Christ, those things didn't happen by accident, but they were predestinated to happen. And I would now, right now, I'm going into something that the Bible doesn't say, but I believe that Jonah was predestinated to be a type of Christ just by the fact of God calling him, sending him to Nineveh.
Okay, question. Are you're more going into the types or types and shadows idea?
Yeah, well, just with the people, not with, there's
Yeah,
shadows and ordinances and things of that nature.
but we know
Yeah.
with people that, like Abraham, is a type of Christ in the way of, in multiple ways. So same with, so in dealing with, so you're dealing more with like types.
Yeah.
Okay.
The predestination part.
Confirming.
Yeah, this is just me saying this, that I believe that God knew that Jonah was going to run. That's why he sent him, because when he ran, after he ran, God was going to send the storm, and Jonah was going to be obstinate, and rather than repenting, he was going to say, throw me overboard. He could have repented. God knew that he would not. He knew that he would get thrown overboard and be in the the belly of the fish for 3 days and
Right.
3
And
nights.
Jesus himself emphasized that Jonah was a type of him 3 days in the earth and being then raised again.
Yeah, so I'm saying that that's the way that Jonah was predestinated to be a type of Christ. The way Joseph was not. There's a few different ways. One is the dreams that God gave him. One is that he was not the firstborn, but he was beloved of Jacob. More so, Jacob giving him the coat of many colors. Jacob sending him out to check on his brothers. There are a few different ways. There's not just one way that
Right.
Joseph was predestinated, what I'm saying, to be a type of Christ,
Okay.
to be conformed to the
Right.
image. So we can see.
So if I understand, you're trying to say that the predestinated to the image of Christ is when dealing with as the Old Testament. That is in what the things that happened to them, they became a type of Christ and showing forth that. And we know that also via the New Testament telling us they were types of an image of Christ. Would that be kind of the idea you're going to?
Yeah, that's the idea I'm going to. Now, some people use those verses to say that gives us comfort and assurance. I think we have comfort and assurance of our salvation without. We'd have a comfort and assurance of our salvation even without Romans 8:29-30, looking at it as we are in those verses. You mentioned Abraham. So Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah, God used that as a way to predestine that to be, for them to be foreshadowing God offering up his son being willing to die. And the Bible says that Abraham received Isaac from the dead in a figure. And that was how God predestinated that just by sending Abraham, knowing what was happening. He had the ram. So
I can see that interpretation. I just didn't understand how you were saying it in your video, but you're a lot clearer in our conversation here. And I can very well see that as being, especially when you're dealing with the Old Testament, because again, they weren't Christ. They weren't in Christ. There was a whole lot of differences. Being that I'm a dispensationalist, I do see the Old Testament different than the church and under the law. But again, you got the types and shadows, and as you're saying, predestined by what they went through became a image of Christ.
Yeah.
and showing for it. So yeah, I could see that as part of that interpretation.
Okay.
I never
All
thought
right.
about that.
Okay. So this is the last time, excuse me, the last thing, because it's time to go. So this is what I'm saying, that if you look at Romans, it's something that Paul does, not just Paul. Lots of people refer to Old Testament scriptures when they're trying to make a point. So Paul does this too. Like, for example, in Romans 3, when he's trying to establish that we're justified by faith alone and not by works, he's saying that in chapter 3, towards the end of chapter 3. And then in verse 4, he refers back to people in the Old Testament, Abraham, and he refers back to David. So what I'm saying is this: it's not just Paul, but other people do that, refer to things in the Old Testament to make a point. So what he's trying to comfort the believers in Rome, and he tells them that we know that all things work together for good to them that love God. And what is the proof? That's when he goes into 29 and 30, when he's trying to prove or demonstrate that we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are the call of the purpose. And so that I don't repeat myself, and since it's time to go, I'll just say, well, two things. Thank you for your time, and any questions?
No question. I understand what you're talking about now, and it's very plausible. Again, I will admit this is the first time actually really hearing it out, and I can see it very plausible. I can't, but and with the word predestination and dealing with the foreknown, as you're talking about, and especially if you deal with it of the Old Testament, not just maybe even those that were saved before in the church idea, though I think it has that also. But when you're going back, you have that. So that could be a very, I would have to think about it more. But I want to thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that up, because I've never heard that. And it's a very plausible explanation also.
I know I said that was going to be the last thing, but I just thought of one other thing, or two other things. The other thing is, I would say that the predestination spoken of in Romans 8 is different than the predestination in Ephesians, and I don't want to touch on Ephesians because it's time to go. But that's part of the reason why I wanted to join you, because like it's not something that other people are saying about the types of Christ. So I just wanted to get that out there and have you consider.
I can accept that also, because the wording is different from Ephesians 1 versus Romans 29. So 29 and 30. So it is still a different wording and all. So I can understand how that can play in different aspects and all. So like I said, it's you got a very good, if I may say, a very good explanation here. And I mean, like I said, this is the first time, but there's a lot of logic in that and a lot of scriptural showing. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for your time. And if we have intruded on Janet's time, thank you, Janet, for your time too, which we stole accidentally, inadvertently.
So she starts at 12:15. So we got a little bit. So we're fine. And she said, we're fine. I just want to make sure we're done in plenty of time, that it doesn't interfere with her show. So that's the only thing. But thank you. I mean, what a great blessing to end on. I mean, like I said, I never thought of it that way. I've never heard of it. But hey, that is a very, very good way, and even if you do put other things, it can be very much a part of the word, along with maybe some other ideas, but never thinking that way. And now thinking, thank you. Because that's a very, you've articulated it this time very well. I think you more emphasized the foreknow than you did the predestination in your video. That's why it was confusing. But now that you emphasize the predestination and how it refers to them being predestinated as a type of Christ, that image of Christ, Yeah, that could very well fit within the structure and all of that passage. So thank you.
Okay.
That
Yes,
that
sir.
that's a blessing.
Okay.
So okay, so like I said, we need to go ahead and cut out because good thing is I'm not working tomorrow, so it's not bad uh, in dealing with. Janet says, please go ahead as long as Brother Kurt wants. Are you in a brownout again, Janet? I know you've been dealing with
Well,
brownouts. If you're not in a brownout, I'm ready to shut down anyways, just to let you know. But yeah, we'll go ahead and
look, can I just
we
say one last thing then? One more
okay.
last thing. All right. So there was a time when people came to Jesus and asked him whether they should pay tribute or not. And he asked for, we'll say, a penny. And they
Right.
brought him a penny. He said, whose image and superscription has this? That image is the same word as it is in Romans 29, icon. I don't speak Greek, but it's the same word. So think about this. When you see a penny, if you see a penny, any coin, we'll see a penny, we'll say a penny. It has Abraham Lincoln on there. When you see that penny, you probably don't think about Abraham Lincoln. You think about it's just 1 cent. If you see it on the ground, you think, is it worth picking it up, this, that, or the other. So when you see that penny, though it has the image of Abraham Lincoln, that's probably not the first thing that comes to your mind. In the same way that the people who are conformed to the image of Christ, which is, I'm saying, types of Christ. When you think about Moses, do you think about Jesus? No. But if you look close enough at that penny, you're going to see Abraham Lincoln. If you look close enough at Moses, you're going to see Jesus. If you look close enough at Joseph, Joshua, and I can't name to you who all the people are that he's talking about, but I believe it's the people that are the types of Christ who, when you first look at them, maybe you don't see Jesus. You look close enough, you will see Jesus. If you look at the penny, or if you're only looking at one side or whatever, you're not going to see Abraham Lincoln, and you might see him and not even think about him, anything about him. The same way with, I would say, the types of Christ that when we see him, we don't always think about Jesus. I just wanted to, that also relates, I believe, to the image about. Even the image is there, we don't always think about the image. We think about
Yeah.
something else. But if we're close enough, we'll see that image.
Well, and I mean, I look at, I mean, I think of types and all, but I usually look at, okay, when you're dealing with types, I look at the New Testament to tell me what are the types in the Old. I don't try to just say everything's a type. Otherwise, you're creating a disaster, in my opinion. But definitely all the ones you've been bringing up are things that have been mentioned in the New Testament. So they're definitely types of Christ. And that's why I'm saying it's a very, what you've given is very scripturally foundational of that of those he foreknew. He also predestinated them into the image of Christ. So again, you have this idea of there's those that he sets up as images or types, images of Christ to portray Christ when he comes and what he's going to do.
And forgive me, but I just thought of one other thing. All right, so we're talking about types of Christ. What if, I'm going to look at the part where it says that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. I think that's what's saying this. If there was just, let's just name three famous people from the Old Testament: Moses, Abraham, David. If those were the only people that were types of Christ, then Christ would be the firstborn among a few brethren. But because there are so many people who are types of Christ, we can say that Jesus Christ is the firstborn among many brethren. I think that's what it's the firstborn among many brethren part is talking about. Think about something that Jesus said. He said the people of Nineveh would rise up with this generation and condemn it because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, a greater than Jonah is here. He also said the same thing about Solomon. A greater than Solomon is here. He said, before Abraham was, I am. So he's greater than Solomon, Abraham, Jonah, and David. So how is Christ David's son when David in the spirit calls him Lord. So he's greater than all of those. That's what it means about firstborn among many brethren. It's not just a few, it's not just three. There are many that he is higher than, the firstborn among many brethren. That's
Right.
the last thing so even if
And
I
that,
think anything else, I'm not going to say it because I already said
and
that's
that
the
has
last
to
thing.
do with also his resurrection, Christ's resurrection, because
Yeah.
his resurrection made him the firstborn among many, and therefore coming and dealing with. Yeah, and this fits with Romans 8 being an experiential passage and not a salvific passage, because that's the
Yeah.
problem. Your Calvinists want to make this always a salvific passage, where this very much, but the majority of the thing of Romans 8 is that of experiential
Yeah.
and
And
giving the surety and things like that.
and all those, I guess I like I said, I haven't looked at all the types, but all the types of Christ were in situations where things worked out for their good. Why? Because they love God and they were called according to his purpose. The same thing applies to us. Not that we're going to be types of Christ like them, but everything's going to work out for our good also. So thank you
Yeah.
very much. And I'm going to
No,
click on
no,
the
no, no, no.
studio.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. That what you brought about, I find as a gem. I mean, you were the blessing on this one. So
Okay.
thank you. I mean,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
glad.
So that I don't take so that I don't take up any more of your time, I'm going to go ahead and click on leave studio and have a nice night and
Okay.
adios. All right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.
Thank you for coming. Okay. So as we deal with the end here, Janet, I'm pretty much done right now because after what is it, 4.5, almost 5 hours here, I can't go as long as Charles with his 9-hour one. I'm sorry, I just can't do that. Plus, I have things I got to do tomorrow also, so I need to get some rest tonight also. So, but thank you all for being a part. I'm glad we ended on this wonderful note. What a blessing! What a blessing from Redefine Apologetics. Like I said, this is why it takes the body of Christ, because we need each other to come and realize there's things that I don't see that. Yeah, Myra, he did a 9-hour thing on his thing for getting prep work for this Saturday for his debate with Rogue Calvinist. It was one long video. So anyways, again, do want to say thank you all for being a part. Those that will listen, thank you for listening. A reminder, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe, hit the like. Also, ring the bell to remind you. If you'd like to give, again, please give. We can use it. Also, as a reminder, we do have the 2 memberships. We have the Pioneer through YouTube, where you can click on, that's 99 cents a month. And then the Layman one is $2.99 a month. And like I said, we could definitely use the help to kind of like offset the cost and all of at least StreamYard. Everything else can then be covered, but we need to still get to that place where we get StreamYard fully covered. And that way we don't have to be thinking about, will we be able to continue? Will we have to actually say we need money? Things like that. Because there has been times, I will admit, we almost had to shut down StreamYard because we didn't have the funds, but praise God, someone gave. So again, it may be doing that way. But I'm just giving you all the different options and things like that to think about. I know times are tough and can be difficult in giving and doing stuff like that. But if you are able to, please think about that, pray about it. And if can, please go ahead and sign up and be at least for the 99 cents a month membership. The Pioneer. We get enough of those, and there do a half a cup of coffee, $2.99. I know I'm talking about the expensive coffees, but the more expensive are like $8, $9, $10 now. So I don't drink coffee. I don't go to those places. So I don't know what their full cost and all is today. But again, thank you all. Dr. Helms, I see you're still in the back there. Like I said, once I shut everything down, you'll be kicked out. So you'll be fine there since you weren't. And in dealing with that, but want to thank everyone that listened for all your questions, for working on Matthew 7, for all the and those that are going to listen. Have a good night, all, and thank you for listening.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe.